All right, so now we're ready to lay out those pins. I'm going to be using the tail board, but first I prefer to space the pin board up away from the surface. That way I can actually get some good downward force holding the tail board in place. If I just clamp the pin board on top of or flush with the top of the bench, then the tail board tends to want to wander. I have one of my hand planes just on its side, and my pin board is flush with the top of it, or with the side of it. And I can space this a little bit back, and then take and set my tail board on there, and then I can get some good downward force. That way it takes a lot more force for me to move that back and forth. So what I'm going to do is there are several ways of locating where the tail board should be in relationship to the pin board. You can take and shine a light up through, and that sometimes helps tell you when you're right where you need to be. I've just done this enough that I know exactly where it needs to be. You can also check to make sure that everything's in line by taking a wider chisel and pushing it up against the sides of both boards, and that makes sure that they are in the same plane on the sides. So now that I've got a sliver of light showing, now I know that I'm ready to start marking. This happens to be just a blunted X-Acto blade knife. X-Acto knife blade, sorry. Obviously it's blunt, or else I wouldn't be rubbing my thumb on it. This particular one is designed specifically for dovetails. You can get this at one of the woodworking supply places. I'm not going to mention names, but it has that blunted blade, which makes a wider line in the end grain, which for everybody who has aging eyes, it's a whole lot easier to see the knife line on this than it would be off my normal marking knife. It's nice and thin, so I can get into tight areas a little bit better than with my marking knife, my all metal one. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping the blade really tight up against these pins, or these tails. I want to have a considerable amount of force down on my board, and because I've been holding it for so long, now my arm's hurting. I'm going to be pushing quite hard into the tail, and I want to make one pass on each one of these. If I think I missed some, I can make another one, but I'm shooting for just having one knife line. So I'm actually pushing kind of hard into the board as well. And there we go. I again like to do all of the ones this direction and then go all the way, or all the ones going the other direction, just because if I'm going back and forth, I lose track. That's just me and my brain. If you feel comfortable alternating and can keep track better that way, do you. So now I'm going to take and get some pencil line down in there, because again, the shop lighting is not so conducive for seeing knife lines. So I'm going to get some pencil lead down into the line. And then I'm actually going to go through and erase most of it. That way whatever was in the knife line is still there, but it hasn't obscured my line by having all of the pencil lead that didn't happen to get into that knife line. So now I know that I want to remove this and this, because that's those guys. All right, so now I need to make my vertical lines. I can do it one of two ways. I prefer to use a knife to do this, just because it gives me something positive to lock into. But again, that is personal preference. I could just use a pencil and mark my vertical lines. So I'm going to take my knife, put it in my knife line, good thing that was a blunt knife. All right, so now I've got those knife lines down the front. Now, once I saw these, if I need to do some trimming, I have something positive to put my chisel into on the front, because I never want to come in from the end grain, which is where most of my knife lines would be coming from. I like to have those ones on the front, just so that I know that I'm putting my chisel in the right location. I'm actually going to put them on the backside, just because I know me. You don't have to do this either. I prefer to have those knife lines as a reference. Right. So just for sight's sake, I'm going to put some pencil in these guys. And mark it. All right, so now we're ready to start sawing away.